Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about, and so it begins. In Texas, the big story breaking today, a woman who had, quote unquote, an illegal abortion past 6 weeks. We don't know details, don't know any of this. Not sure if it was 6 weeks and an hour, 6 weeks and a day, 7 weeks. Don't know. Don't know if she crossed state lines. We know nothing. All we know is Lizelle Herrera, 26-year-old, was arrested and served an indictment, served on the charge of murder, being held on $500,000 bond, and, well, here it is, the first test case. Will the state of Texas execute this woman for murder? And will this be the thing that finally gets people to go, oh, wow, they're serious? Will this be that moment where people go, oh, my God, they're not joking? This isn't just a fundraising gimmick. This isn't just Republican dog chasing the car and then finding the car and then barking it and barking and barking. No, this is the dog finding the car and then chewing right through the metal to attack the driver. This is what this is. And look, I've been saying all along, it's coming. These crazy people, they want blood. She's currently being held in the Starr County Detention Center, $500,000. Now, as I understand, this is still going through the process. So again, they're going to make this woman's life miserable for however long this drags out. And like I said, it's details very sketchy at this point. Don't know all the details, but we do know they are going to use the power of the state to punish this woman. So it sends the message to those other women. Don't you dare. Remember, this is the party of small government, less intrusive government. Party of stay out of our lives. Except for you, honey. We know what you did. And I got to wonder, this, again, since details very sketchy, how much did the bounty hunter part of this play in? Is someone going to collect $10,000 for putting this woman in jail? Is this all part of this? Will there be a reality show? Will someone be able to go to TLC and say, look what we did, look what we accomplished? Scary times, folks. Scary, scary times. And like I said, and so it begins. And look, that really kind of is the cherry on the top of the crazy Sunday that we've had this week. You look at all of the just the insanity that has come out of the Republican Party. I look at just some of the right-wing nuttery. Crazy. Devin Nunes, my favorite chew toy, and still waiting for Devin Nunes, the CEO of Trump Media. He sits high atop the Truth Social. Oh, the bombing Truth Social. But hey, like the good corporate shill that he is turning into, he evidently said that Twitter is kind of a ghost town. There's not much activity over at Twitter right now, especially when you compare it to sites like ours. Our interactions are really beating Twitter. And I don't know what world he's living in. I don't know what he's on. Maybe Twitter could start instead of his, Devin Nunes' cow and Devin Nunes' mother accounts, maybe Devin Nunes' drugs. We could figure out what it is he's taking, because nobody's on Truth Social. I go over there. There's no interaction whatsoever. You read through some of the crazy posts of the people who would pay like the $28 to get the blue check, and there are no comments. No one is retruthing, probably because it's all lies, which would explain why there is no retruthing. But I'm still waiting, marking the days until he realizes he's not getting paid. That will be a fun day. Now, again, we had some fun this week. Lauren Boebert, again, crazy nutcase over from Colorado. She came out with a brilliant idea of, evidently, she believes that if you think you're a member of the LGBT community, if you think you're transgender or whatever, that you shouldn't. Maybe there should be a law. I don't know. That you shouldn't be allowed to come out until you're 21. In fact, she said we require people to be 21 to purchase alcoholic beverages and 21 to purchase tobacco products. This is what she tweeted. Why is it so unreasonable to require people to reach a certain level of maturity before making life-altering decisions about their sexuality and their identity? Yeah, the Twitters that evidently, according to Devin Nunes, nobody is on, literally torched her. At what age did she decide that, well, she was going... I'm sure you know where that went. This is, again, the people who tell us smaller, less intrusive government, don't want people in your lives, want you to live your family values and your truth, and life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, constitutional people, except where they want you to be like them. Miserable and hateful. Very, very, very bizarre week it has been. Now, that didn't compare to the woman thing with Josh Hawley, which still, I got to tell you, my favorite stupid moment. The senator from the Show Me How Stupid You Are state, he kind of led the pack. When you come out and you go, well, I think, if you can have birth, then you're a woman. Well, what if you can't? Well, if you have a uterus, well, what if you don't? Well, if you have one of those things, maybe I've seen one once. That was fun. Not to mention, I forgot Trump blaming Pelosi for the Capitol riots. That was fun. I mean, just so much wing nuttery. 63 Republicans coming out and not supporting NATO and Ukraine. Also fun. And you go, in any given week, any of these stories is like all you're talking about. And this is all, stuff that had happened. The fact that you've got a congressman from Arizona, this Paul Gosar, who evidently is being promoted as the special guest for an upcoming white nationalist event, and you'll never guess what date the white nationalist event is on. It's on Hitler's birthday. You can't make this up. But again, I digress. Any other period I think in our country's history, the insanity takes us, so far. Now, the thing that gets me is these people are in positions of respectability. These people are in positions of power. These people are in positions where they can influence policy. And that's how we get where we are. And this is where the Republicans have done some really, really just vile stuff. I mean, again, it's moving us in this direction where they want us to lead the lives that they believe, not the lives that we want. That's the thing that gets me. And that's the thing that's most angering and most frustrating. They're telling the rest of us how we have to live our lives. They're destroying my pursuit of happiness, my life, my liberty. And this is where we've got to start drawing the line. Look, I go back to the abortion thing. Who believes they have the right to tell that woman what she can do with her body? And this is where I'm at. Now, I've said from the beginning, I'm not pro-abortion. I'm pro-safety. And this poor woman is going to be abused. She is going to be tortured over the next, months with this, in and out of jail, bankrupt, you name it. And I think, a rich woman is going to get what she needs. That's my problem in this. the hypocrisy, it's crazy. Let's go to the phone lines. I got Julie on line one. Julie, how are you today?
Hi, I'm good. I wanted to talk briefly about a couple of topics. Number one, I don't know if the corporate media has picked up the story about the woman in Texas, and I'm wondering, I wonder if you can execute someone under 18. So I don't know if that's going to play in there. But I wanted to say that, Rick, you probably have a lot of listeners that are under the age of 40, and if you're under the age of 40, you don't remember a whole slew of events where once a year, once every 2 years, and a doctor who performed abortions, the clinic would get blown up or he would be murdered, maybe outside of his house or maybe murdered in the clinic. And so there were a number of doctors that were actually killed. And I'm thinking, gosh, that must have been more than 20 years ago. So I'm thinking, geez, if you're in your 20s, 30s, or about 40, you're not going to remember that. But I just wanted to share that with your listeners. And the other thing I wanted to say was the whole thing about projection. I know you've brought it up before. If the Republicans say that the Democrats are doing it, it means they're doing it themselves. But I find it fascinating that it's been a successful strategy. A couple quick examples. Many years ago, we had all those Democrats. They want to rule from the bench in the Supreme Court. We don't want that. And they complained about that for, oh my goodness, 10 years maybe. And then, of course, what we have today is a massively right-wing court that is ruling from the bench.
Yep, activist judges, Julie, activist judges.
Yeah. And the other thing is, Hillary Clinton, it's in the basement of a pizza shop. She's sexually abusing children, and all these Democrats are child abusing. Meanwhile, we've got more than 100 Republicans that have been seriously charged with abusing children. Talk to me about the whole thing about projection. What's in their psychology of the Republicans, and why the heck do you think it works? I'll hang up and listen.
I appreciate the call, Julie. Thanks so much. No, I mean, this is just one of those things where you plant the seed in someone's head and you say, they're doing this, go get them. And I think we get blinders on. And look, because nobody, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, nobody is on the side of a pedophile. And look, if there are pedophiles, I get that. And this is where early on the Q people had my ear for about, 3.5 seconds until they went totally out of their minds. Until you found out there was no basement in that pizza shop. That was the part of that equation that was kind of interesting. Yes, there's a child pornography ring in the basement of the pizza shop. And then you go, does it have a pizza? Does it have a basement? Well, no. But, we still know it's going on. That's where you kind of lose me. Where we start seeing this happening, like today, for instance, the story, one of Trump's former campaign aides, this Ruben Verostiki, I guess his name is, he was sentenced to 12 years in prison for his what? His role in a child pornography ring. That was the story today. But they're still, again, as you said, Julie, projecting this on those Democrats. I talked yesterday about Representative Rose from Tennessee, had a scholarship for high school kids that his current wife got, when she was a little girl in high school, and he was 40 some years old, handing that out when she was a teenager. Yeah, I mean, this kind of stuff is what they get away with. And as long as you keep pushing the outrage candy, as long as those chaos merchants on right-wing radio keep focusing that audience there, that's where they focus. And that's where the outrage goes. And never shall we look inward. Look, if there are people who are groomers, if there are people who are child molesters, we got to go get them, because there's no room for that. But sadly, when you look at who they really are, I mean, come on. Nobody holds a candle to the Republicans because they're repressed. This is where, I keep saying, coming back to, I want people who are living their truth. I don't want people hiding in closets, because this kind of stuff brings out the ugliest stuff. That's my problem with who the Republicans have been. They're the people who outwardly are saying, oh, this is horrible, we got to condemn it, while quietly being some of the worst offenders. Just my thought. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Quick break, right back after this. Got a lot to get to on the other side. Some craziness out of Mike Gibbons. Oh no, say it isn't so. Another stupid comment from an Ohio senatorial candidate? Tell me it isn't so. Right back after this. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Ah, yes, Mike Gibbons. Mike Gibbons. Rich guy Mike Gibbons, leading senatorial candidate on the Republican side from Ohio, Mike Gibbons. He said, kind of in a Mitt Romney-esque kind of way. You remember Mittens back when he ran for president in 2012, said, those poor people, those 47%, they don't pay any federal taxes. Those scofflaws, those lazy people. Well, Gibbons said, quote, the top 20% of earners in the United States pay 82% of federal income tax. And if you do the math, 45 to 50% don't pay any income tax. You can see the middle class is not really paying any kind of fair share, depending on how you want to define it. And, my first thought is he's probably right, because the middle class has been eviscerated. What's really left? I mean, honestly, rich guy, read the freaking room. The Trump anger has been that the middle class of this country has been squeezed to the point to where we're struggling. We're having a really hard time making ends meet, and I argue has everything to do with Reagan's assault on labor unions and the fact that our wages haven't kept up. Now, he's right. He is absolutely right. The rich people do pay the high taxes. I'll cite conservative groups, the National Taxpayers Union, a conservative taxpayer group. At least they say so, funded by right-wing think tanks. They point out that the top 1% pays nearly 39% of the taxes. Top 10% pays almost 70%. They point out that the bottom 50% pays about 3%. That's accurate. People who make from 50 to 100 grand pay about 9% of the overall federal tax bill. That's federal. That's not counting state. That's not counting local, where all of that falls on the back of we the working people, because like Pennsylvania, where I'm at, has a flat tax. So if you're making a lower wage, you're getting socked. That's where the rich guy's getting away almost scot-free. And don't forget, let's not talk about sales taxes, which are really regressive. We're really talking federal. And this is where a lot of this stuff gets into the weeds, and this guy knows that. What the National Taxpayer Union also points out is that since 1980, and this is right from their most their report, since 1980, the income tax share of the top 1% of filers doubled from 19%, while the top marginal tax rate actually fell from 70% in 1980 to 39.6% in 13 through 17. So what they're saying is, look, the rich people are paying a higher portion of the overall bill, even though their tax rate fell. And that's because they're taking an enormous share of the wealth that we create. And of course, we're taking on a massive amount of debt to cover this. And I point to the fact that in 1980, Average CEO to worker pay CEO was making 42 times what the average worker was making. By 2000, that number had jumped up to 525 times. So you go, okay, well, hold on. Yes, they're paying the federal tax rate because they've got all the freaking money. So yes, I will pay higher taxes if you give me all the money. Yes, I will be happy to pay more. I'll be thrilled to pay more. Just like those 47% of the people who aren't paying federal taxes, I know would be so happy to pay federal income tax if it meant that they were earning more money so that they could support their families, keep a roof over their head, save for college, take vacations. I know for most working people, a thing of the past. And understand, when my grandparents' generation were in their work lives, vacations were something that were a staple. Because they had this weird thing, and I know most of us have never heard this. They had this weird concept in their budget called, here it comes, you ready for it? Disposable income. Yeah, here's a blast from the past. Maybe you've heard about it from a museum. Maybe you read about it in a library. People used to have income that didn't go to bills or food or health care or education or student loans. Maybe you've heard of it. People used to have leisure time. You didn't have to have two incomes to survive because you had strong labor unions that demanded better wages, hours, conditions, and productivity. You had productivity gains that went right in hand with workers' raises, where you actually had something of a meritocracy. Oh my gosh, yes, you did. And you didn't have a CEO pay gap, as pointed out by the good folks over at EPI, the Economic Policy Institute. From 1978 to 2019, CEO pay growth grew at 940%. While you and me and the rest of the working stiffs who go and punch a clock every day saw our compensation grow by a meager 12%. So when Mike Gibbons goes, well, we pay all the taxes, it's because you make all the freaking money. It's because you've stolen all of it. And this is why, I want people to be outraged. I want people to be angry. I want people to go, you know what? Enough of this. It's time to organize. I want women in the streets going, what? You're not gonna tell me what I'm gonna do with my body. You're not gonna take my rights away. I want workers to demand a fair share of the wealth that their labor creates. I want people to say, you know what? If we work hard, we play by the rules, we better get ahead. I want that. I know that archaic idea of disposable income, leisure time, vacation. The idea, the old-fashioned idea of one family income, being able to support a family and raise a family. I know these are old-fashioned ideas. I get it. I'm an old-fashioned guy. One income, support a family? Come on, Rick. That's so Norman Rockwell. But it's possible. And not only is it possible, it's something that we have to do. Because you're going to have the Gibbons. This guy could be a U.S. Senator. And he could take this mindset into the U.S. Senate and push for policies that's going to make all of this stuff worse, while pushing the kind of divisive nonsense, culture war stuff down our throats, while still robbing us blind. That's my problem. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you're just joining us, grab the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day sparring between Henry Ford and John L. Lewis spilled over into the press. The CIO formally declared their organizing drive of some 150,000 workers at the Ford Motor Company. John L. Lewis addressed a crowd of 25,000 the night before at the Detroit State Fairgrounds Coliseum, celebrating the recent organizing victory at Chrysler. Lewis thundered, Ford, Henry Ford will change his mind. He added that the victories at Chrysler and General Motors came as a result of workers' dissatisfaction with their conditions. Lewis also noted that Ford Motor Company prevented workers from joining unions through a system of intimidation and coercion. Ford insisted he would never recognize the UAW or any other union in response to sit-downs at Ford plants in Kansas City and St. Louis. Notoriously anti-Semitic, he then alleged that international banking interests financed CIO organizing drives. Ford maintained workers had no reason to celebrate organizing victories, claiming workers had lost through joining unions. He said they've had their freedom taken away. They pay money to the unions and get nothing in return. But Ford was also one of the few industrial employers that hired blacks. Organizing at Ford meant organizing black workers. It meant bringing black workers on as organizers and staffers in the UAW. The UAW waged a pointed campaign to attract black workers at Ford and concentrated efforts at the massive River Rouge complex. UAW leaders Homer Martin and Wyndham Mortimer urged black workers to join up with them, saying, quote, "We must solve together, not pitted against one another, all discrimination." It would take more than 4 years to finally organize at Ford, but black workers were at the forefront of that struggle. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Barry Goldwater, considered a right-wing fringe candidate in 1964, won the Republican presidential nomination by declaring that, quote, "extremism in defense of liberty is no vice." But the GOP is now way beyond the fringe, declaring that nuttiness in the defense of extremism is no vice. Consider Jenny Thomas. Her recent far-out political effort to overthrow the people's 2020 presidential vote shows that her husband Clarence Thomas, the dogmatic Supreme Court reactionary, is not the nuttiest member of the Thomas household. He's the best known of the duo, but wife Jenny has quietly been moving into the top circle of unhinged political conspiracy activists. Biden's defeat of Trump in 2020 set off this supremely connected partisan like an explosion in a fireworks factory. She spewed out a weeks-long barrage of text messages to Trump's chief of staff demanding that Republicans use the court to stop Congress from certifying Biden's victory. Jenny instructed the White House to, quote, "release the Kraken." Huh? Kraken, the name of a mythological sea monster, was used by manic right-wingers as code for a package of kooky lawsuits they hoped judges would use to put Trump back in power. Jenny Thomas was not merely someone babbling free speech opinions, but she was a powerful political plotter actively strategizing to have unelected judges usurp the people's democratic authority. This was too crazy, even for the right-wing Republicans now running the high court, except for one. Guess who? Yes, despite his obvious conflict of interest, Clarence used his position to try to advance election cases in which his spouse had a personal stake. This is Jim Hightower saying, yet he wasn't punished for violating the ethics code because the U.S. Supreme Court has no ethics code.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Like I said, I'm still wondering, and I'm hoping in the next couple of days some more details come out about this woman arrested for having the audacity to think that she has some bit of self-determination on what happens to her own body. I want to know whether, this was, she went to another state and someone ratted her out. The bounty hunters got her. I want to know if they paid out the 10 grand. I'm really interested to see what comes out of the details of this story. As Texas has arrested this woman. Again, her name is Lizelle Herrera, and 26-year-old woman held on $500,000 in the Starr County Detention Center there in Texas. And this is all because they passed that Senate Bill 8 that still hasn't been completely adjudicated, but they're still moving forward, going to make people miserable. Here to share some thoughts on this and highly predictable, I've asked our good friend Max Burns to come talk with us. Max is a Democratic strategist, also a fabulous columnist over at The Daily Beast. You can check out his work at thedailybeast.com. Max, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So predictable. I mean, we've been waiting for this. This is the test case. We're going to see how this goes. Predictably, a poor woman that probably not going to be able to defend herself. I'm sure there's going to be some money and some groups that are going to move to her aid, but this poor woman is going to be made the example and send a chilling effect across the poor community for some time, I fear.
Yeah, that's right. And we need to make clear that just because this is predictable, just because we knew that this is what Republicans wanted to do, doesn't make it any less horrific. I mean, we are now jailing and arresting women for exercising what is a constitutional right. The Supreme Court still holds that Roe versus Wade is the law of the land, but not in Texas and not in Missouri and not in any number of states that are looking at a wide range of abortion restriction laws. They're now writing their own laws in a complete slap to the face of democracy and the United States government.
Scary times, and I wanted to give you a chance to throw in on that because again, we don't know all the details yet. I don't know if it happened 6 days or 6 weeks in an hour, 6 weeks in a day. Don't know if she crossed state lines. I'm waiting for more details. But again, this is Texas doing what Texas does, and as someone said, maybe are we going to execute this woman now? Is this where this goes?
Yeah. And none of these details should be relevant. It's not a crime to cross state lines to get an abortion. It's not a crime to get an abortion, even in Texas, under federal law. The fact that she was arrested, and not coincidentally that she is a woman of color, a minority, it shows you the face of the Republican Party now that they don't have to pretend to care about democracy.
No, that is an excellent point. And speaking about not caring about democracy, I want to change topics a little bit because we seem to know everything we need to know about what happened on January 6th, but we keep finding out more. And today, the story about Don Jr., having texted, I guess it was Mark Meadows, about saying, hey, we have all the levers of power. We control all the multiple paths to holding on to power. This stuff, he's not bright enough to think this stuff up. This was all told to him. This was all spoon fed to him, and he was just like his father, diarrhea of the mouth. This is another one of those moments, Max, where you go, how long do we have to wait before we start locking these people up?
Yeah, it makes you think that if this conspiracy had taken place with slightly more competent people, the country would have been in a very dangerous place. The fact that these people could not shut their mouths, that they were giddy at the thought that Donald Trump was watching television, enraptured at this, that Don Jr. was crowing about how they control the entire Republican Party. This is exactly the overreach that people warned for years Donald Trump was capable of. And we need to know exactly what happened. I think getting these records is important, but we also need to make sure that we are prosecuting people who are obstructing efforts to get these records.
Now, we've talked about this quite often over the last several months, and I think we both agree this is taking way, way too long. All this stuff should have been out months ago, if not a year ago, in my view. But we're starting to see some of the cracks. Today, in fact, one of the Proud Boys, this Charles Donahue, one of the Proud Boy leaders, evidently says he admits there was a plan to storm the Capitol. We now know this. That Ali Alexander is now working with the grand jury. There's a lot of these pieces that are, shall we say, not going to go Trump's way. I think. I'm still in this spot where I don't believe it. I don't believe that they're going to hold him accountable. But the more that these dominoes fall, the more I'm allowing myself to be a little bit hopeful.
Yeah, and I think today's news is really reassuring. I mean, that the leader of the Proud Boys is now essentially cooperating with the Department of Justice. Another big move that Merrick Garland delivered without any leaks, while being criticized for not doing enough, is actually very effectively turning senior leaders of this movement on each other and turning them into witnesses for the state. And that's how we're going to get beyond just who was there and who broke into these offices to who funded and who organized this. And that's a road that leads really quickly to Charlie Kirk, to Ginny Thomas, to a lot of Republican organizations that were busing in people to this rally and who were organizing and in communication with these people. And this is their worst fear, that these people are voluntarily giving up information. But they don't have the money and the political protection to avoid prosecution like Steve Bannon does, they have to cut a deal or they're going to jail for a long time.
Yeah, and that's part of what you're seeing here. Especially with that Ali Alexander guy. My thought was that he was going to be a weak link all along, because you're right. He doesn't have the kind of resources that an Alex Jones would have. He doesn't have the resources that a Steve Bannon would have. And they are kind of like Trump in a sense. They would most certainly allow him to be cut off and suffer the consequences while they walk away scot-free.
Yeah, and this is the ultimate grift of the MAGA movement. It's people who have had Donald Trump's back and enabled him to do horrible and criminal acts, to incite an insurrection. I mean, the leader of the Proud Boys said in his statement that he knew at the time that they were organizing this, that the purpose of this event was to stop the count and to change the count of the Electoral College vote, to essentially overthrow the democratic process itself. That is a huge admission. It establishes that these weren't tourists who just got caught up in the moment, that these were individuals who knew in advance what they wanted to achieve. They had planned it, funded it, trained for it, and that this is an organized effort to attack democracy. And that is something that the Republicans should have to answer for every single day of this midterm election.
No, and that's the thing. I mean, if you were paying attention during that period, and I was reading Parler at the time pretty religiously, because I sign up for all of those crazy right-wing sites because I want to know what people are saying, and that was the pervasive thought at the time. We're going to take our guns, and if they try and take it, we're going to stack up bodies. Being one of the theory, one of the lines of thought that I remember going, wow. The day before going, I can't imagine how much blood is going to be in the streets tomorrow. Fortunately, there wasn't as much as I had anticipated, but it was still just as ugly of a day and as bad. But you know what, Max, I'm looking at all this and all of the things that are coming out and all these different stories, all of these different crimes, all of these, it is overwhelming. And it's so much that you go, any past administration, and maybe you'll agree with me on this, any other administration, each individual piece of this would be a defining moment for these administrations. And there are, hundreds of them that maybe it's just, there's so much that you can't get just one to define this administration. Maybe that's the mastery of the Trump administration. There is so much criming that you can't narrow it down to just one.
Yeah, the scale of corruption is unprecedented. It literally, at some point, Steve Bannon mentioned on his podcast, became a strategy to just flood the zone, to overwhelm the media, to overwhelm regulators and lawmakers with just the sheer pace of audacious norm violation, law violation, to the point where it almost didn't seem real. That these cries that today Donald Trump had done some fresh new outrage didn't resonate with voters because they heard it so frequently they thought it couldn't be true. But what we're seeing is that it is true, that they were not particularly good at covering their tracks, and that almost everyone that they've worked with on this has so far turned state's evidence. So if I was Donald Trump and his enablers, I would be very worried about where this leads.
Yeah, the mastery, I think, of Trump is, he was criming in public and everyone knew it and everyone saw it. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Max Burns. Max is a Democratic strategist, columnist at The Daily Beast. Make sure you check out his work over at thedailybeast.com. We'll get links out on how you can check out his incredible work. One of my favorite writers over there. Now, I want to get some of your thoughts on again, the criming that's going on. You look at this Iraq war veteran, this Brian Colfage, I guess, he just pled guilty to fraud. Millions of dollars came into building the wall. I mean, it seems like everybody around this entire administration and around the entire movement, it was all about the grift. It was all about how much they could fleece the flock and how much they could line their pockets. And yet the flock still follows, which is weird to me.
It is sort of the secular version of prosperity gospel. I mean, Donald Trump has been doing this for years. I mean, the guy is famous for hawking mail order steaks and telling you that it would make you feel rich. These are people who are bought in deeply to this. I mean, this build the wall scam was a scam from the outset, was a knowing grift. The same as Trump's Truth Social. I saw it just lost a few executives People have cashed out from the initial boom of pumping up that SPAC stock. And now that it's starting to dip, you're noticing all of the early money is exiting quietly, including Donald Trump, who hasn't mentioned it in quite a while himself. These things will not stop as long as people give him money. But more than money, now the Republicans are giving him the apparatus of the Republican Party to execute these schemes on a national scale.
No.
I mean, Donald Trump dreamed of this kind of distribution network for his steak business.
Or his vodka, or his airlines, or you name it. There was a bunch of that, or his university. Crazy. You brought up, total control of the Republican Party and the kind of control Trump has. And I'm sure you saw Mitch McConnell this week with Jonathan Swan over at Axios, and the comments that McConnell made. And a lot of people were surprised by McConnell's position that, if Trump's the head of, if he's the nominee, that he would surprise him, that he would support him. I'm not surprised at all, because McConnell is a tactician. He doesn't have any core beliefs, and this is where, when Swan's asking about his moral red line, I'm going, this guy's got no morals, let alone a red line. What are you talking about a moral red line for?
Yeah, Mitch McConnell's moral line has always been what works in the moment, what accumulates the best strategy for long-term power. For a long time, that was the judiciary and working his way into building a huge Republican force within the federal judiciary. Now it's towards managing this Trump movement within the party. Mitch McConnell is still of the opinion that he can control this movement and that he can guide it if Trump comes back to power. I think that is his biggest miscalculation. That will be the one that comes back to get him. And when you listen to him so confidently talking, you just think about the naivete almost of having that level of confidence against a chaos agent like Donald Trump. He didn't seem to work very well during Trump's presidency. I don't know why he thinks it would work better in a second term.
Yeah, no, it's quite frightening. Did you see the behavior? Half the Senate was happy today, where Mitch McConnell basically led the other half of the Republican Senate out as the event today with Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Yeah, that's the Republican legacy here, is turning your backs and walking out on women, on black people, on justice. I think Republicans are used to not being in the same room as justice, so this was no shock for them. But it does show a core disrespect. I mean, for as brief as it was, the Supreme Court justice nomination hearings were incredibly virulent and race-filled. Josh Hawley and his incredibly racist remarks. And I think when we just walk away from that and we don't have a discussion as a country about what we just put this woman through, and the language we used about her and accusing her of pedophilia or protecting pedophiles, it coarsens our government, and it coarsens what people expect of government. And that doesn't lead anywhere good.
Yeah, I had someone email me, say, you Democrats are all groomers. And the only reason I'm saying this because I know it makes you mad. I'm going, no, it doesn't make me mad. It shows how stupid you are. Because, I look at, the true groomers, and you've got one in Tennessee who, I look at this Representative Rose, where I'm stunned that someone in the Republican Party wouldn't be going after that guy who literally had a college scholarship for teenagers in high school, and then ended up marrying one of them that he gave that scholarship to, where he's like 25 years older than her. That to me really creepy. That to me going, that's the epitome of groomer right there.
Yeah, I think we should ask these Republicans what their thoughts are on Matt Gaetz, how he's still sitting on a committee and commanding respect and headlining fundraisers for the Republican Party, or what they thought about Roy Moore, what they thought about Dennis Hastert, or any number of these people that they have protected and that they have enabled to continue their crimes. I mean, Matt Gaetz not only is not being punished, he has people rallying around him in support and saying, even if he did it, it wasn't that bad. This is a far cry from any kind of moral line Republicans used to pretend to in the past.
Wasn't that bad. I guess you can almost justify anything if you're out there far enough. I mean, I guess that's the scary thing. Last line I've got for you, because here's the scary place we're in. Is it far off the fringe as Republicans have gone, as crazy as this week has been with all of the wing nuttery? All of the money, all of the political money is on them taking back the House and the Senate come November. As far off the beaten path as they are, as extreme as they are, what do Democrats have to do to rein this in? I keep coming back to the Carvel thing. It's the economy, stupid. If we can't rein in some inflation stuff, we can't bring gas prices down. I think it's not going to be a good November.
No, it's going to be tough. And I know we've talked a lot about how abortion needs to be a frontline issue. But we also need to be talking about this infrastructure package. We were promised a big national roadshow from President Biden about the details of this bill, going state to state, talking on the local level about what it means for jobs, what it means for a family's ability to feed their kids. And that hasn't materialized yet. I understand foreign affairs and the situation in Ukraine has distracted. But at this point, with Democrats facing a situation like they're facing, the president needs to be able to handle domestic and foreign affairs at the same time. Yeah. And we need to do it convincingly, because we do not want the Republican Party in decision-making positions on issues of Russia and Ukraine when they've shown so clearly where their cards lie.
No, you're not kidding there. Considering 63 of them voted against something simple like saying that we support NATO and Ukraine, what you would think would be a yawn vote, you had 63 Republicans voting against it. That's scary stuff.
Yeah, we are in a profoundly scary place. It is a Republican Party that doesn't just see in Vladimir Putin an ally, but something to emulate here domestically. Donald Trump praises him constantly. I mean, we see this openly. There is no shame about it. So this is on Americans to vote and prevent this.
I'm right there with you. Max, I appreciate the time. Always good stuff. Good talking to you, my friend.
Thanks.
Good stuff. Max Burns. Make sure you check out his stuff over at The Daily Beast. TheDailyBeast.com is where you check it out. I'm going to take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. If you missed any portion of the program, it's always there for your convenience, your entertainment. I hear it's fabulous. Whether you're an iTunes person, whether you're an iHeart person, Podbean, Stitcher, anywhere in between, it's always there. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1952. That was the day that President Harry S. Truman issued Executive Order 10340, nationalizing the U.S. steel industry. The president had hoped to stop a looming steel strike while the nation was embroiled in the Korean War. The president's order listed several reasons for the action, including, quote, American fighting men and the fighting men of other nations of the United Nations are now engaged in deadly combat with the forces of aggression in Korea, and forces of the United States are stationed elsewhere overseas for the purpose of participating in the defense of the Atlantic community against aggression. Another stated reason was that, quote, the weapons and other materials needed by our armed forces and by those joined with us in the defense of the free world are produced to a great extent in this country, and steel is an indispensable component of substantially all of such weapons and materials. He also listed, quote, steel is likewise indispensable to the carrying out of programs of the Atomic Energy Commission of vital importance to our defense efforts. Another reason Truman claimed was that continuing an uninterrupted supply of steel is also indispensable to the maintenance of the economy of the United States, upon which our military strength depends. After the announcement of the order, it only took some steel company owners 27 minutes to file for an emergency injunction to stop the seizure. They were not successful in getting their injunction, but the case went on to the Supreme Court. In May, the court ruled in a 6-3 decision that President Truman did not have the right to seize the mills. The day the court decision came down, the steelworkers went out on strike, eventually winning pay raises.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Alice on line one. Alice, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am fabulous. What's on your mind?
Well, the thing with the woman in Texas, you know, I don't understand either how any of this is legal, considering they're saying that, obviously they're saying that state law supersedes federal law, so I don't get that. But what I do know is a few months ago, when Pennsylvania was tossing around different things, I wrote a very interesting email to my state legislature member, and she is a Republican. And, well, you know, but the listeners don't know, that I can be a very convincing writer when I put myself in the mood. And I will tell you what, the very next morning at 10 in the morning, they called me from her office, and the girl was hysterical because I had said, look, I know what you Republicans are doing, and don't even think that you're going to pass this kind of law in Pennsylvania, because I can promise you I will be at the head of the line raising the resistance against you. And then I went on to say, you know, how that they were at the point, their things seemed to be that if they lost an election, of course it wasn't legitimate. And I just went on and on. But I do know this much, that if everyone out there starts getting on their high horses like I did and letting these people know, look, you're not going to do this, we'll get some action.
No, you've got to make them. You got to make them afraid for their jobs. Again, I keep coming back to blaming us for the current situation we're in, because they don't fear us, because they've gerrymandered us out of relevance. And this is where we've got to, you know, put our flags aside, got to take the hats off, and say, look, you know, this is about actual representation. This thing in Texas is crazy. But
well, it is, and it's insane. And you know, Julie is right, because she's around my age. I distinctly recall that, and that was back in the 80s, by the way, Julie, in case you're listening.
Yeah.
Every time you turned the news on, there was an abortion clinic being blown up, or a doctor being shot, or the nurses and the doctors being shot. It was just all over the place. And the younger generation, they don't realize that it's only been the last 50 or 60 years that women have gotten any rights at all. That back in the 60s, you had to have your husband sign for you to get a credit card.
Yeah, there is that.
So, you know, my thing is, I'm afraid that, you know, the younger generation, not all of them, but some of them, are very complacent, and they're going, well, it's not going to happen until it does. It's a lot easier to get the right than to have the right taken away and now try to get it back again, because that's just a mess. But anyways, you have a good evening.
Thank you, Alice. I appreciate it. No, she's spot on. No, I mean, at the end of the day, for me, it's fight it before it's taken away. You know, I still remember my mother telling me the story of a friend of hers who had to go to Kentucky to get a backroom abortion, and she got sick. And as I remember the story, the woman died. And, you know, my mother's generation had those stories. You know, my generation doesn't, because it was legal for people of my generation. You know, it was accessible. Granted, you had to fight through it, and there were lines, and there was all kind of, you know, insanity. And as you pointed out, there were people being harmed, but you know, it's making me question what's going on. I'm hoping there's going to be some outrage. I'm hoping some anger. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back after this.
Facts are that oil majors testifying here today still returned billions of dollars to your shareholders in 2020 at the same time that you were laying off your workforce.
Lawmakers blast big oil CEOs for using wartime profits to enrich investors.
Today, we are proposing to take our sanctions a step further. We will make them broader and sharper, so that they cut even deeper into the Russian economy.
Europe moves to ban Russian coal. Plus, more destructive storms are causing more power outages and costing taxpayers more money.
Thanks to climate change. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
It's troubling that you place profits over people and profits over our planet.
Well, maybe, Congressman, but you might have just given the anti-American oil companies their new tagline.
Profits over people and profits over our planet.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I like it. Profits over our people and profits over our planet.
I'm sure they'll adopt that right away.
I think why wouldn't they? What do you have for us today?
Well, in a House Energy and Commerce hearing on Wednesday,
frankly, given your profits, you could drop prices without even increasing production.
Top executives from Big Oil defended their decisions to return cash to shareholders rather than increase production or lower wholesale prices as gas prices spike in the U.S. due to the fast pandemic recovery and Russia's war on Ukraine.
Because they hate America and the planet.
House Democrats criticized the CEOs and Republicans for falsely blaming Biden administration policies while the oil companies sit on millions of acres of unused drilling leases on public lands. At the same time, they're pulling in record profits. In earnings calls to investors in February, Big Oil CEOs admitted as much. Here are the CEOs of Pioneer Natural Resources, Diamondback Energy, and Occidental Resources.
We're not going to change our growth rate. We think it's important to return cash back to the shareholders.
No one wants to see that shareholder return program, put at risk.
We have no need and no intent to invest in production growth this year.
They have no need to invest in production growth this year, even as the Republicans are yelling at Joe Biden for not expanding oil drilling. Give me a break, man.
In the hearing on Wednesday, Democratic Representative Frank Pallone of New Jersey noted that oil companies decide the wholesale price of gas, which in turn sets retail prices. Pallone asked the CEOs of Chevron and BP if they would commit to any action to lower gas prices for American families.
Will you commit to doing whatever it takes, including increasing production, but also reducing dividends and buybacks in order to lower prices for struggling American consumers? Yes or no?
Mr. Chairman, we can increase production and return value.
All right, I'm going to take that as a no. Mr. Lawler, yes or no?
Yes, I can't commit. I can't commit to a reduction in buybacks and dividends.
All right, I hear you.
Unbelievable.
A new report from Bailout Watch confirms that Big Oil is using wartime profits to enrich investors, finding that the nation's biggest oil and gas companies significantly increased their shareholder dividends and stock buybacks after Russia invaded Ukraine. Progressive lawmakers in the hearing also pushed for accelerated investment in clean energy to reduce the nation's reliance on dictators and oil companies. In other news, in the wake of horrific evidence of probable war crimes committed by Russian troops against civilians in Ukraine, the European Union has proposed a total ban on imports of Russian coal.
Good.
But not yet imports of oil and gas. Europe gets about 45% of its coal from Russia, which is a major revenue source for Russia. A handful of EU countries have ruled out directly targeting Russian oil and gas. But tiny Lithuania is moving ahead anyway, with a ban on Russian natural gas.
Good.
Portugal announced this week it has moved up its target of reaching 80% clean electricity forward to 2026, 4 years earlier than previously planned.
Also good.
Here in the U.S., though, climate change impacts are already increasing costs. A new AP analysis of federal data shows that power outages from severe weather have doubled over the past 2 decades across the U.S. due to the increase in extreme weather driven by man-made global warming, which is crippling broad segments of the nation's aging electrical grid. AP found that at least 40 states now see longer outages, which are causing significant economic losses and can be deadly for the elderly, disabled, and other vulnerable communities. But finally, some good news. The Biden Environmental Protection Agency announced this week that it will finally ban deadly asbestos, a carcinogen that is still used in some products like brake pads and gaskets and still kills thousands of Americans every year.
And it's still not banned?
Nope. This final ban is made possible under a landmark law signed by President Obama that overhauled regulations governing tens of thousands of toxic chemicals.
Well, good thing Big Oil can't turn a profit on asbestos.
Profits profits over people and profits over our planet.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, reports coming out of Russia, out of the Kremlin, upwards of 20,000 Russian troops killed as they've invaded Ukraine. And you go, 20,000. 20,000. And that's not even, that's just now. I was reading this report from that quoted the Ukrainian energy minister, this Herman Galashenko, who said that, all of the Russian soldiers that went into the exclusion zone at Chernobyl, people went into this contaminated site that I'm sure there are giant signs that say, danger, don't come in here. High radiation, don't do it. Don't dig in the contaminated soil with your bare hands. Probably not a good idea. Evidently, this is what they did. They dug with their bare hands. They breathed in the dust. They did all this stuff, drove their equipment through. This guy's saying they'll all be dead within a year because they've been that exposed to the radiation. They are that contaminated. And oh, by the way, they're going to take a little bit home to their families. Congratulations. Because that stuff is stuff you carry with you. Take a little souvenir that you get to take home with you from Chernobyl. Wow. And how many people, this is just all bad. And here to share some thoughts on just how bad. I've asked our good friend Olga Lautman to come talk with us. She's an expert researcher on Russia and Ukraine, a senior fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis. If you want to check out the amazing work that she does, olgalautman.substack.com is where she does her writing. Olga, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you.
So, I'm looking at this statement by the energy minister, and I'm going, look, I'm really paranoid of radiation and things like this. I don't know that I'd be digging in the dirt at Chernobyl, but here we go. Is he right? All these people going through there, they're going to be dead within a year, you think?
Absolutely. And, if you go back to when Russia brutally assaulted and invaded Ukraine, February 24th, the first thing they did was, hijack Chernobyl. And they kept these poor workers hostages for over a month. And, this is a contaminated site. You have to treat, obviously, it's a nuclear plant and a site from Chernobyl, one of the biggest nuclear disasters. You have to have certain protocols. Here he sends a bunch of drunk soldiers through to hijack this plant, and they also hijacked another plant, a nuclear plant, and were shelling it. And now, we see the results. Of course, they're going to have contamination. They were digging through a nuclear plant with zero precautions. And and it goes back to the bigger picture. You mentioned upwards of 20,000. It's been 5 weeks, this Putin's war. And I think at this point, they've lost more soldiers than the Soviets lost in Afghanistan. And it just goes to show you, Putin doesn't care. He does not care about his people. He doesn't care if he kills 500,000 of his citizens, his soldiers, as long as, he gets what he wants.
But here's the thing, Olga. Here back home here, if we lost 20,000 people and that kind, there would be mass outrage. Look, I believe people are people, and my problem isn't with the Russian people. My problem is this is one giant a-hole who is doing this. This is Putin's war. There's one criminal, one war criminal, one person that I blame for this. the people there have got to be looking at this going, 20,000, is it worth this? I mean, there's got to be some level of outrage. No, I mean, obviously you know better than I do. Nothing, anything, something.
Crickets. No, there's no outrage because they really do believe that, Russia is fighting a just war, denazifying their neighbor. And, so no, I mean, if anything, you've heard the recordings. And, I started that it was Putin's war and that it is, his regime who is conducting this war. But after the scenes we have seen come out over the weekend, and after the German intercepts of, soldiers calling back home to say, oh, I just looted a washing machine and, some stuff after, massacring a family. And the people on the other line saying, oh, when are we going to get it? How soon are you getting it back here? It shows you there is a much bigger problem. And this is a danger of when you have propaganda being played to you for, under Putin for 2 decades, under the Soviets for even more decades. This is the result. You have people who are just living in a complete different reality, think that there's a complete different war. They don't understand, what is happening. And I mean, I think the problem now is a little bit bigger than Putin.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it. I mean, because the argument is always, it's easy to dehumanize people who don't look like you. People are different, but these are people who speak almost the same language. I mean, you have a common language, a common heritage, a common history, and that kind of behavior, disgraceful.
Yeah, it is. And, this is something that I've been wrestling with over the past week since the scenes have come out of Bucha. I mean, they are committing executions, massacres of people who look like their grandmothers, their, nieces, nephews. They're raping 3-year-old kids. I mean, today we saw they knowingly targeted a train station that had thousands of people fleeing and waiting for the train to flee, and they sent a missile strike. So, I mean, what is happening, it's crazy. We are literally watching Russia conduct a genocide against Ukrainians, and it's playing out on social media, and it's like we're all sitting here paralyzed, outraged at the scenes, but it's still happening. As we're speaking, there are families right now who are being hunted down and executed, and it's horrific.
What more can be done? I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think Biden has done as much as I think we can do without actually directly getting us into a war with Russia, which I don't think anyone in this country is prepared for or willing to get into. I think sanctions haven't worked because the globe is dependent on Russia for oil and gas. And until we get off of the juice, until we find alternative energy, they're still going to have that kind of an upper hand. So, in your role as senior fellow there at the Center for European Policy and Analysis, what is the way forward? What's the direction to hold them accountable, to starve them out, to make these sanctions work, or is this a failed endeavor?
Well, no, the sanctions will work, and we need to sanction to the point that it hits the people in Russia, because, once it hits them and they start feeling uncomfortable, maybe they'll wake up and, come out or at least realize that it is their government that got them into this. So we need to continue the sanctions. We need to supply Ukraine with more. Every statement you hear from them, I mean, they are fighting one of the largest armies, and they were not properly equipped to go into it. Meanwhile, they were invaded in 2014. So they should have been prepared and trained for all these weapons, from 2014 on. But I mean, we, United States and Europe, needs to do everything right now to guarantee their win. Because if Ukraine fails, then Russia is coming right after NATO countries. I don't know if you saw the statement today. Already they're beginning now that Latvia has Nazis, and that the Latvian government has, is supporting Nazis that are endangering Russians in Latvia. So, I mean, is this where we want to go? That we're going to have, Nazis everywhere. Russia decides there are Nazis, and then they are going to threaten military action. So we need to end Putin inside of Ukraine. And to do that, we need to make sure that Ukraine has more weapons than they know what to do with. And I can tell you that there are some, problems with the logistics, because I am getting requests, from people like, we need Toyota trucks, we need these, we need ammunition. So we need to make sure that between United States and Europe, that they are saturated with weapons and that they defeat the Russian army, because there are no negotiations. Either the Russians get defeated in Ukraine, or the war comes out of Ukraine and moves into Europe.
Or they steamroll. Because, I said from the beginning, this isn't going to stop there. They want to get the old band back together. That is the goal. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Olga Lautman, expert researcher on Russia and Ukraine, senior fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis. You can check out her writing over at olgalautman.substack.com. We'll get links out on social media how you can do that. Now, there's some stories coming out of France, and this is concerning, Olga, because the fact that we are as a globe somewhat united, and I would argue extremely united, because Joe Biden has pulled the globe together in historic fashion. But if France throws Macron out and we end up with this Le Pen, who has been a Putin sympathizer, this could throw that alliance into some chaos, and this could not be good.
No, not at all. And yes, Joe Biden did an excellent job uniting the world, the free world, because honestly, we haven't seen this unity since post-World War II. And, to a point that people were even thinking NATO's obsolete, were they for? And now we're seeing exactly how important NATO is. With Le Pen, look, in 2016, when Russia was running the operation to install Trump, they were running the same operation to try to install Le Pen. And they even made portraits of Le Pen, Putin, Le Pen, and Trump. So her campaign was funded in 2016 by the Russians, and it's not only just the oligarchs, it is a darker version of it with like Alexander Dugin and like the nationalist fascists, who are the ones who are supporting her campaign and who support all the far right movements across Europe. So, this is extremely dangerous, and I hope the French, come out. I'm no fan of Macron, but at least he is part of the alliance. He understands the danger. And if with Le Pen, I don't know. This is exactly what Putin is looking for, to find weaknesses, to exploit the alliance, to try to, pull threads on it in order to have it unravel. So far, we haven't. If Le Pen wins, that is a big danger.
Yeah. Now you brought up, you threw Trump's name into the middle of all that, and there are people here who in this country who don't believe any of the stuff from 2016, that that Russia was involved at all in the 2016 election. I still have friends who say, it was all a hoax. The Russia thing was all a hoax, and it wasn't. No, they wanted Trump in as president for the sole purpose to weaken NATO, so that this would then be where we end. And I still have people who say, Olga, that if Trump were president, he would have never invaded Ukraine. He would have never done this if Trump were president. What do you say to that?
Absolutely not. First of all, you saw, as Putin was preparing invasion, Trump told him, what a brilliant negotiator and how tough he is. So, Trump would have rolled out the red carpet. Plus, he would have done everything to sabotage the NATO alliance. So we would have been in a lot more danger now had Trump been president. And look, Putin has his own military timetable of when he's was planning to invade Ukraine. He first wanted to get Belarus, which he did, and then Ukraine. The fact that we have Biden right now, thank God, because at least the world respects him. He's holding the alliances together. The military is making all the right moves, or as much as they can, to supply Ukraine. I just think they need to increase the supply. With Trump, no. No. That would just be a disaster. I mean, right now there would be no NATO alliance right now.
So last question I've got for you, and it's kind of the big one, because I get this from some people who go, why do we care what happens in Ukraine? Why is this important to U.S. interest? Because you've got the mindset that we need to take care of our own. We need to worry about what's going on here. That's miles away. It's not our problem. Why is it our problem?
Well, for two reasons, or three reasons. The first reason, Ukraine was a testing ground for decades. All the cyber attacks, the political capture of installing leaders into countries, election interference, creating political parties, infiltrating. That was all tested in Ukraine. And then once Putin perfected it in Ukraine, he exported it into Europe and into the United States. So that's number one. Number two, we have, a world order where countries have borders. You cannot allow one country, just because they decided to, go into another country and say this is our country and cause a war, and in this case a genocide, in order to claim land. Because if we allow it with Russia and say, oh, who cares, it's Ukraine and Russia, you know what, it's going to happen. China's going to do the same with Taiwan, and for that matter, whatever country China wants to take over. You'll have Middle Eastern countries who are going to say, you know what, if Russia could do it and this one can do it, I like my neighbors, so I'm going to take them over. This is not a world order we want, where there's no international norms. And number three, we cannot turn our look away from genocide being committed. I mean, right now, you have a Russian military going house to house, hunting people and executing them, families, children. I mean, they pulled out like 70,000. They kidnapped and put them into some kind of filtration camps inside of Russia, would sound like Soviet gulags. I mean, what is the point of having democracy and values of freedom and human rights if we're going to allow genocide to happen and say, that has nothing to do with what's happening to me? So those are the 3 points. And, and we as United States, who pushes these values and endorses these values, we need to make sure, that countries are protected, their sovereignty is protected, and that people don't get massacred in mass numbers.
Now, it's a horrible situation, and I think we need to be doing more of, like you said, getting them the things that they need to defend themselves, getting them the equipment, all of the stuff that they need, without question. Olga, I appreciate the time. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Olga Lautman. Make sure you check out the work that she does over at olgalautman.substack.com, where she does her writing. This is just a horrible situation. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, thericksmithshow.com. So, I'm a real quick shout out to our friends at the Harrisburg Area Community College Faculty Union, who just won their union vote. We've had them on, a couple of times over the last year and a half. They've been organizing for 2.5 years right now. In fact, on Monday we're going to have someone on to talk about the campaign and the work that they've done. I think Lewis Jones will be back. He's an adjunct professor there at the community college, and really the historic campaign that they ran. And good on them. They're going to affiliate with the Pennsylvania State Education Association. And it comes back down to, wages, hours, conditions. It comes down to a voice on the job. So good on them. 2.5 years they fought for this. And also good on the MIT Graduate Student Union, who they had a landslide victory. And they're organizing. They started the MIT Graduate Student Union. They're at with the good folks with the UE United Electrical. Huge win for them. 4 years they were doing it. They were fighting for it, for affordable housing, for dental insurance, for protections in the workplace, for benefits for not just for themselves, for international students, fair and clear job expectations, basic rights on the job, basic sanity. So, good on them. Also, I got to throw this out real quick before we go to break. The Amazon Labor Union folks who had the big win last week, Amazon is appealing it, and you'll love the reasons why. The reasons why is, those union thugs, they were intimidating our poor members. The company who spent high-priced hitmen muscle to come in and hold captive audience meetings and threaten people that, they're going to steal your jobs and they're going to, the little startup union that could, with all the organizing committee people they're the ones who are going to harass and intimidate you. Now understand, Amazon's goal in all this is to stretch it out as long as they can so that they don't have to negotiate, because they know the longer this plays out, the more they can harass and intimidate people. The other part of their argument is they're attacking the NLRB because evidently their other argument is, well, since you decided against us down in Alabama, that made us look bad, so that the people here made us look bad because we broke the law down there and you held us accountable for breaking the law. So then that made us look bad, and then they would vote against us here. And oh, by the way, we fired somebody for union activities, and you did your job, NLRB, and that was injurious to us as well. Because of course, you doing your job is bad for us. And my favorite was one of their statements. They said that they were disappointed by the election result because they still believe having a direct relationship with their employees is what's best for them. Because of course, Amazon knows what's best for the workers. Amazon knows what's best for their employees. Amazon knows what's best. And how dare you think for yourself? How dare you peon workers think that you need someone to talk for you? We'll do that for you. Don't you know that? That's kind of the message out of this. So I'm happy, again, that the president we have is president, and that he has appointed an NLRB general counsel and an NLRB that's not going to put up with this. But again, the goal here is not for Amazon to win this argument. It's to delay the process long enough to hold on to not doing any real bargaining. That's what this is really about. And as long as they can get away with not bargaining, as long as they can get out stretching this out, this is a win for them. And this is, again, another reason why our labor laws need major reform. Major reform. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program podcast, make sure you grab that. I hear it's great. Also, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2 on On this day in labor history, the year was 1952. That was the day that President Harry S. Truman issued Executive Order 10340, nationalizing the... I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1952. That was the day that President Harry S. Truman issued Executive Order 10340, nationalizing the U.S. steel industry. The president had hoped to stop a looming steel strike while the nation was embroiled in the Korean War. The president's order listed several reasons for the action, including, quote, American fighting men and the fighting men of other nations of the United Nations are now engaged in deadly combat with the forces of aggression in Korea, and forces of the United States are stationed elsewhere overseas for the purpose of participating in the defense of the Atlantic community against aggression. Another stated reason was that, quote, the weapons and other materials needed by our armed forces and by those joined with us in the defense of the free world are produced to a great extent in this country, and steel is an indispensable component of substantially all of such weapons and materials. He also listed, quote, steel is likewise indispensable to the carrying out of programs of the Atomic Energy Commission of vital importance to our defense efforts. Another reason Truman claimed was that continuing an uninterrupted supply of steel is also indispensable to the maintenance of the economy of the United States, upon which our military strength depends. After the announcement of the order, it only took some steel company owners 27 minutes to file for an emergency injunction to stop the seizure. They were not successful in getting their injunction, but the case went on to the Supreme Court. In May, the court ruled in a 6-3 decision that President Truman did not have the right to seize the mills. The day the court decision came down, the steelworkers went out on strike, eventually winning pay raises.
Barry Goldwater, considered a right-wing fringe candidate in 1964, won the Republican presidential nomination by declaring that, quote, extremism in defense of liberty is no vice. But the GOP is now way beyond the fringe, declaring that nuttiness in the defense of extremism is no vice. Consider Jenny Thomas. Her recent far-out political effort to overthrow the people's 2020 presidential vote shows that her husband Clarence Thomas, the dogmatic Supreme Court reactionary, is not the nuttiest member of the Thomas household. He's the best known of the duo, but wife Jenny has quietly been moving into the top circle of unhinged political conspiracy activists. Biden's defeat of Trump in 2020 set off this supremely connected partisan like an explosion in a fireworks factory. She spewed out a weeks-long barrage of text messages to Trump's chief of staff demanding that Republicans use the court to stop Congress from certifying Biden's victory. Jenny instructed the White House to, quote, release the Kraken. Huh? Kraken, the name of a mythological sea monster, was used by manic right-wingers as code for a package of kooky lawsuits they hoped judges would use to put Trump back in power. Jenny Thomas was not merely someone babbling free speech opinions, but she was a powerful political plotter actively strategizing to have unelected judges usurp the people's democratic authority. This was too crazy even for the right-wing Republicans now running the high court, except for one. Guess who? Yes, despite his obvious conflict of interest, Clarence used his position to try to advance election cases in which his spouse had a personal stake. This is Jim Hightower saying, yet he wasn't punished for violating the ethics code because the U.S. Supreme Court has no ethics code.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Interesting comment today by Delaware Senator Chris Coon. This is one of those interesting things that kind of grabbed my attention on the as we're talking about now Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. And he was talking about his own opposition to Neil Gorsuch when Gorsuch was coming up for his confirmation. And the quote goes like this. He said, that was at the point at which I first voted against the nominee for the Supreme Court, not based on his qualifications. Eminently qualified, great temperament, good writer, strong record of service, but I disagreed with his philosophy. He said, I own that I am part of this problem. And now I kind of disagree with this because, there is a lot on face that Gorsuch was kind of outside of the mainstream philosophy. Okay, but temperament, I don't know. This kind of taking a self-beating, I don't know. I think I'm struggling with this. And here to help me maybe work through a little bit of it, I've asked our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So, I'm looking at this comment from Senator Coons. And look, I understand the want, the need to go, okay, the system's broken, take some responsibility for maybe having a little bit of a part in it. But I look at someone like Gorsuch, I look at someone like Kavanaugh, I look at some of the appointments that Trump made as really not even attempting to go with the old norms of reaching across to the minority and saying, hey, are there anybody that you would find somewhat palatable? I mean, it seems like this is what liberals do, it seems to me.
You mean doing the mea culpa for it?
Yeah, this just seems to, I don't know. I mean, I'm struggling with this a little bit. Or am I out of line, do you think?
No, I mean, if you look at the two justices, with Gorsuch and then Kavanaugh, of course, Kavanaugh was a whole different world due to allegations which obviously, Gorsuch didn't have. Now, there will be people disputing Gorsuch, but obviously the fireworks were, with Kavanaugh for a whole wide variety of different reasons. Here's one thing about this. If you just, this is human nature, I think. If you just want to look at the qualifications, and Senator Kuhn is admitting that, that qualifications aren't enough. As you said, he said that was the point which I first voted against the nominee, not based on his qualifications, but his philosophy. Well, if you're just going to look at qualifications, period, then you really don't even have to, then you have to ban asking them any question from the left or the right about philosophy. Then you ban it, and you say, what's your qualifications? How many cases did you do? And if that's how we're going to decide Supreme Court justices, then it's a false narrative, Rick, because nobody can tell me that members don't sit there and think, okay, how are they going to vote on abortion? How are they going to vote on, gun control? Members think that, and members of certain political parties will want members more in tune to their philosophy to go in there. I don't think anybody needs to apologize for, looking at somebody's philosophy plus qualifications.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this.
Which is what he's doing.
Yeah, I'm struggling with this. Look, I'm with you. If someone, I look at Gorsuch, and my problem with Gorsuch is not that he's not a bright guy, not that he's supposedly well written. I haven't read all of his things. My problem is he was going to let a truck driver die on the side of the road or get fired. That was the guy's choice. There was a case in which a truck driver broke down on the side of the road. His brakes froze up in freezing temperature on the trailer. He dropped the trailer on the side of the road, sought warmth, and then returned. The company fired him. And Gorsuch was the guy who said, yeah, that was a righteous firing. And I'm going, no, that is not the world I want to live in, where your choice is keep your job or freeze to death and die.
I mean, but when you look at what the senator says, what does he? I would love to ask him the question, and the reporter should have asked the question. Well, what would you do? How would you set the hearing process if you don't look at the philosophy of the person? How do you do the hearing? You can't take away human nature of what you think about people. Now, look, if somebody has a great philosophy and you agree with it and their qualifications are horrible, then you ought to turn them down based on the qualifications. But people usually should, I don't say usually, should blend both. Look, when you look at the new Justice-to-be Jackson, first of all, it was disingenuous to attack her for anybody as a public defender that she defended. You know, you might attack your uncle if he's the public defender. He comes at a private lunch at your house and you say, why'd you defend that person?
Right.
But everybody knows that public defenders are handed a case, you take an oath, and you do it. She also met the congressional set guidelines on the child porn issues or the child molestation issues. She met the guidelines that most of the judges carry out of either ilk, Republican or Democrat. So, I didn't see, philosophically, I don't see where she was a big deal that, I thought 3 to 5 Republicans would vote, but I think more could have voted for her.
Yeah, I mean, I look back and I was thinking about some of the votes of the past where you look at Sandra Day O'Connor, for instance. Her confirmation vote was, 99 to nothing. I look at Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who has been, over the years, has been the, the most liberal ever. She got a 96 to 3 vote. And maybe I look at this and go, maybe that's a far gone past era. We're never going to return to that. I guess what Coons is looking for, what I'm kind of going, is there a way back to that, or is that era dead?
Mm-hmm. I thought it was more, I don't know, I thought it was an apologetic stance of his, of some kind of crisis of conscience of
I see it as that way, but I think in his mind there's kind of way, like this utopian past that a lot of people want to pine for, where we had bipartisanship and people were qualified and we moved forward, and there was, now it's turned into these really ugly kind of things, like this idiot question, what is a woman? It was a gotcha question from the word go, and they can't even answer it.
Right.
By the way, what is a woman?
I don't think that Supreme Court hearings are going to go back to. Yeah. I don't think they're going to go back to what might have happened a couple of decades ago.
Good point.
Now you get your extreme cases that come up. Like Clarence Thomas, there was an issue. Kavanaugh, there was an issue. But a lot of the justices, there weren't personal issues to the cases, and then some of them had bipartisan votes. I'm not sure it'll go back to that, because now it's sort of like advocacy groups go crazy. Look, as soon as they said there's going to be a Democrat nominee, it wouldn't have mattered if she was in a of a 1 to 10 on conservatives. If she was a 6, it wouldn't have mattered. She's a Democrat.
No.
Same would apply, if it's a Republican nominee. So I don't know that it ever goes back to that.
Do you think it has to do with the fact that we now see, so much of what we thought was the norm being changed? I mean, John Roberts, when he was going through his confirmation, said he believed in decided law, stare decisis. He was just going to call balls and strikes. And there wasn't as much objection to him, because I think people thought the world was a fairly stable place. Where now, the Supreme Court decides life and death, decides, whether, your worldview is going to be crushed or there seems to be so much at stake. And, we have a media culture that creates this environment that there's so much at stake that I think that now there seems to be more attention paid than maybe ever before.
Well, I think there is. And also the media creates, any reporter on Capitol Hill knows what the budget process is. They know what the shut down the government is. They know what it is to continue, funding measures. But they take the drama to the edge. Oh, it's, what are they going to do now? They're to the edge. The continuing resolution for the budget. They'll build a hype, then they'll move on to something else. And of course, the Supreme Court hearings will, be hyped beyond comprehension. I thought, frankly, that there was very little hype on the nominee Jackson, really.
No, I thought she did a great job. I thought there wasn't anything really controversial. And look, what I love about this is, virtually every Republican came out and said, she's qualified. She's got a great story. I mean, Paul Ryan came out and said she should be on the court. She had she's a great person. All this stuff. Ben Sasse had like the best statement. I mean, extremely qualified, all down the line. But I can't vote for her. I mean, Sarah Palin yesterday had a comment that just stopped me in my tracks. Who even she admitted, that she's insulted that. How did it go? She's insulted that Joe Biden, made these parameters. She's insulted that Joe Biden, felt. Here it is. It's pretty insulting that he decided to create those parameters and stick within that because not that she's not qualified, but there are so many good qualified constitutionalists out there. And you go, no, it's not that she's not qualified. It's that she's not white and not a guy. I think that's what she meant to say.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, look, the president during the campaign could have said, he'll consider everybody for nomination, and then fully intended to nominate an African-American female. He could have done that. Yeah. Here's the bottom line. He didn't. He made a campaign statement. He's upheld a campaign promise.
Yep.
As
Ronald Reagan did.
That's the one thing about Reagan, too. Sometimes, people would say, what did he do that for? Well, he said he would, and you elected him, and there you go.
Yep.
But with Biden, President Biden, he couldn't have then all of a sudden said, well, yes, I'm going to appoint the first African-American female, but by the way, everybody else, come on and apply. What would that have done to him?
Yeah.
He made a statement, and he carried it out.
Now she is the 116th Supreme Court Justice, and now obviously the first black woman on the court. Historic day. I thought if you saw her speech today, I thought it was she hit all the right tones. I thought she did a great job. The weird thing is she's got to wait till July to be seated. Is that unusual?
Till he is officially out, right?
Yeah, is that unusual?
Yeah. They could step out before, but I guess they have to wait.
I mean, he didn't die, so I mean, normally that's how this stuff works. Someone goes, and that's how they fill it. But I think it was Chuck Todd today said that this is going to be the last victory for the Biden administration, and I'm hoping that's not true. I still have a tiny bit of hope that Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema got out of the way, and maybe even Mark Kelly too, and maybe you get some of that the next bill to help rebuild and do some things that need to be done. Curious your thoughts on the Manchin and the Sinema and the Build Back Better agenda. Anything coming out? Do you think?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, Manchin, according to Senator Manchin, last year in May, told Senator Schumer, the Democratic leader, that he wasn't on board. And then, there were people trying to run ad campaigns, which friends of mine called me and said, well, what do you think if they run an ad campaign against Manchin? I said, good luck in West Virginia. I mean, really. And so then it came, to be that Manchin was going to maybe do something. The White House made a statement, well, negotiations are done, so Manchin came back and said, okay, I'm done. I think he was done before that, Rick, to be honest with you.
I agree.
But just when the White House made the statement, well, they were shutting down negotiations for the time being. It was close to holidays or whatever. Then he said, well, I'm done. Now, a week ago, there's talk that maybe he could take pieces of this, maybe, I don't know, whatever pieces, he could of the bill, the BBB bill. And all of a sudden, Senator Sinema comes out, well, not in a press conference, into a group of supporters, and I think it might have been at a fundraiser, I'm not sure, don't want to misquote, but, at a couple of events, and says, no, I'm not on board. Now, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I serve with Senator Schumer in the House, and he's a leader in the Senate, but I'm sitting here thinking to myself, don't deal with public statements on these issues with these two senators. Find out what you want and what you can get, and you have to have them both on board unless something changes with the makeup of the Senate.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I think how many times, if you were running the Senate, Rick, how many times would you say, okay, let's retry this, Joe? I mean, then if you get past Joe Manchin, you have to get past Senator cinema.
Yeah, and then there's Mark Kelly in the wings as well, waiting to booger that up as well.
Well,
It's the Circular Firing Squad.
Circular Firing Squad. I was part of the whip organization of the House, and there was a reason that we privately tallied votes. Nancy Pelosi is one of the best people at this. She doesn't bring things up into the floor that she loses, okay? Which is what has happened to the Senate Democrat side. And so you count your votes on something big, something huge, something you care about. Then you maneuver it, you count your votes, and you kind of go forward from that point. And that's not happening. So I don't know. Think maybe of some other things on the agenda. Maybe they should. But I would say in general, trying to make announcements that they're close to negotiating something, I think they better, I don't know, have a lunch first.
Yeah, I'm with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Bob Ney, former Ohio congressman, political analyst. Before I let you go, I wanted to get your thoughts on this Khashoggi trial. And I know this is something you've been following and I've been talking with you about for, what's this been going on? When did this happen? 2018? When he was, murdered and dismembered and killed in the Saudi embassy there in Istanbul. I understand that there was a trial beginning in abstention of what 26 people. Now perhaps something. What's going on?
Well, look, I lived in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and MBS Mohammed bin Salman, which I also call Mr. Bonesaw, as a snide remark, knew that these people were over there. He sent these people over there. There's no doubt or question about it. You don't have those top Saudis run to Turkey and saw a guy, literally is what they did. They sought him up and killed him. You don't have that happening without the king knowing it, because he's the acting king. And, of course, this was a hot issue. People were angry. Turkey went after him and pursued it. Then it went to court. And then all of a sudden, oil is powerful, Rick. Oil is powerful, and money is powerful. And all of a sudden, the Turkish court, which is controlled by the Turkish government, it's not, like our system where you have judges make decisions maybe against, what powerful political people want. All of a sudden, the court says, well, we're not going to have a trial at this point in time of these people. See, if they would have had a trial in Turkey and they got those individuals over there out of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and one of them said, hey, give me protection, then a lot of truth might have come out. These people now are on trial in Saudi Arabia. They're living in palaces. They can come and go and do what they want to do. This is all it's a sham show. Yeah. That's exactly what it is. So Turkey yielded to powerful interests, money, and oil.
Yeah, well, the wealthy elite win again.
That's it. Big oil.
Sad stuff. Bob, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Ney. Are you surprised that the money, power, and influence seem to win over we the people? That's why we've got to stand together, unite, and fight back. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We're going to take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. If you just joined us, make sure you grab the podcast so you never miss a moment. Back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1911. At 6:30 in the morning, an explosion shook the Banner mine, owned by the Pratt Consolidated Coal Company. Banner was located near what would later become Birmingham, Alabama. The explosion occurred because of gases that had accumulated in the mine. The deadly gases thwarted rescue efforts. Rescue crews could hear the trapped men banging on pipes. However, they could not reach them. By the time the gases had dissipated, 128 men had died. A crowd gathered to hold a vigil at the rescue site. Yet, it was different than similar crowds at other mining disasters, for it included few family members of the miners. That was because 125 of the deceased miners had no family nearby. They were part of the notorious Alabama convict leasing program. Starting in the 1870s, this brutal program imprisoned black men for mostly misdemeanors. The men were charged high court costs. If they could not afford to pay the costs, they were put to work doing hard labor on farms, lumber yards, railroads, and in the mine. The men had to live in deplorable housing without enough food. Some were tortured. For state prisoners, which were 90% black, the annual death rates were between 4 and 5%. For county prisoners, the death rates could be much higher. Alabama coal mining companies exploited this imprisoned labor. They brought in convict labor to replace anyone who dared mention unionization. They paid far less for the imprisoned workers than they would have had to pay for free labor. After the Banner mine disaster, the state passed some new mine safety regulations, but the convict lease system did not end for another 17 years. Alabama was the last state in the country to stop the convict lease program.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. What, again, as we started off, what an interesting, bizarre kind of week it has been. I mean, you know, when you look at this Supreme Court nomination process, and look, I would love to go back to a time where you got sane, rational people on the court. I wasn't thrilled with the Trump people, because you knew they were extremists. And I look at someone like Khashoggi Jackson, and I don't see the extremism. This is someone who followed the law, and they didn't bring these cases up because here's the weird thing. All of the examples that they threw out were things that all of the Trump appointee judges the lower court judges were doing as well. So it's one of those things where they were pointing the finger going, oh, you're doing this extreme stuff, when it is what everyone else is doing. Because they were trying to they were trying to stir up the outrage candy for the base, to give them something to be, you know, angry about. And it's one of these things that, honestly and truthfully, it's infuriating, because we've come to this moment where we're so polarized that our institutions are becoming that polarized. And it's us. I come back to us. We've allowed this to happen. We've voted for these extremists who keep pushing in these directions. You know, back in 2018, I remember talking to my labor friends saying, you know, you voted for somebody in Trump who is going to change the world of labor in fairly ugly ways. And there's going to have to be a pushback. And that will be viewed as you know, massive change just to get where we were on this day. So when Trump, his appointees, Gorsuch, made the decision that the Abood case would be overturned and Janus would be now the rule of law, and we were going to create in the public sector, all public sector workers were going to be no rights at work. Which would mean you could have free riders, and this horrible right to work idea would now take hold in the public sector, which they had always had before in a sense, but you at least had to pay some kind of nominal fee to help the union defend workers. Understand, right to work laws are all about taking money away from unions to be able to defend people, but while still making them defend the free riders. That's the part of this. And I was telling people at the time, what they're going to do is they're going to destroy the unions by making them represent the free riders and basically starve them out of existence. And to get back to where we were the day before Janus was decided will seem like the most radical thing ever to the right wing, because, you know, look what they're doing. Because they want you to think that well, it's as it always has been. Because this is the mastery of 1984, if you've ever read the book. This is what they do. They rewrite history, and once they're able to rewrite it, it's always been that way. It's the way it's always been. And this is where you and we have to step forward and speak out and fight back against this craziness. I know it's a lot. I know it's hard. But we've got to be the ones that hold these people accountable. And while the radical fringe continues to march us in the wrong direction, we got to get involved. And I know it's easy to throw up our hands and go, oh, they're all crazy. I just want to live my life. But right now is the time to stand up and fight more than ever. Now is the time to be engaged and active and angry. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com is where you go to get the podcast. You can also email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.